Hello to the Taking 20 podcast family. I said I'd release an episode if I had time. For better or for worse, here it is. Another episode of the Taking 20 podcast, but today is an extra special episode because I'm taking a break from the usual 20 minutes of advice to bring you a special treat. A collection of some of the best bloopers that I made during recording in 2023. I believe in humility, and one of the ways I do that is to laugh at myself. When I was a kid, there was a show called TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes, and in it you would see these amazingly talented and polished actors screwing up so royally, and it always made me laugh when I watched, so I always wanted to produce one of these episodes for the podcast. I really hope that you enjoy this lighthearted peek behind the curtain to show you just how badly I can flub up a simple weekly 20-minute episode. This episode will shatter any illusion of professionalism that you think this podcast has maintained. A couple of warnings. This episode won't be as polished as my usual releases, so the audio level may vary a little bit. Also, I collected some of my examples of frustrated days where my language was a little blue, a little adult. I usually don't censor my language, but when you hear so much of it in a row, it's a little strong. So I replaced the curse words with a squeaky horn sound. Every horn that you hear is a curse word, and evidently, I can get a little foul-mouthed when I screw up a lot. Hopefully it won't be too annoying. Also, the cuts are marked by beeps when I record, so you may hear quite a few of those as well. So sit back, relax, and listen to the technical glitches like my microphone arms swinging away from me, hitting my knee on a table, the times when my mouth didn't work right, and other amateurish flubs that I've made behind the mic. I'll be back with normal episodes in a couple of weeks, but in the meantime, I hope you had the happiest of holidays and that your 2024 is the best year of your life yet. So let's start with section 1, body functions. Let's get this lowbrow stuff out of the way first. Most of the time, I drink hot tea when I record, but sometimes it's a soft drink when I need something refreshing. And if I get in a hurry, well, this happens. So here's the long-awaited example. Woo. Excuse me. To include hers, the next. Woo. Besides a fear effect, they will also induce nausea. Besides these audio tracks narrate the relevant Oops. Alex wasn't just passed over for promotion, she was passed over for a less quality. She was passed over for the less quality. Those actions don't take very long, but they do help increase the visibility of the podcast, so I would appreciate if you would take a minute out of your time. There's no shortage. Oh, there it is. A year's worth of burps in about a minute. You are so welcome. I promise you the rest of this episode isn't nearly as gross. For section 2, I called it the hold up section. Sometimes when I'm recording, I'll make a mistake and catch it very quickly, but when that happens, I tend to talk to no one about it. I'm alone in my office when I'm recording. Doesn't stop me from trying to talk to someone, though. The first scenario could be a social encounter at the caravansary. Oops. One thing that makes monsters tougher is to give them additional resources or immunities. Oh, sorry. That's not working. Role-playing tends to be speaking more in first person than third person. It's not Delian saying something, I'm saying something. Wait. Suppose the nation of Tholia in your game has a world population exploration encounters. But before I go, I do want to thank this week's sponsor, Heroes. Nope. But regardless of what system you're playing, if your party's prepared spellcaster guessed wrong in 5e, nope. The red-skinned gray hag, oops. I realized that by naming the first character, it was a weapons-grade spoiler for one of my Pathfinder, nope. As you're preparing your one-shot adventure, there are why does that repeat? One of the things I've discovered is that I can get kind of frustrated when I can't get a take right and have so many mess-ups in a row. And if you want to know what frustrated Jeremy sounds like, listen to this. If they chose to be messengers, then they would reach this particular island. This feeds information back into the recommended. Next is the diaspora, which is an asteroid planet. Dang it. This could be a back to basics episode all its own for And this could be a best. The last type of poor preparation. Remember to engage all of the sentence. Remember all the sentence. Blah. Everything. Ravenna is a half-elf cleric of Erastil who grew up in Al-Ota. One other thing no fault to designers of yesteryear, by the way. The game had closer ties to tabletop art. The game had closer ties to tabletop role. I probably should forgive myself a little bit easier, but, hey, these things happen. I've mentioned before on this podcast that I have insomnia pretty regularly, so sometimes I'll record at 2 or 3 in the morning, a few nights before an episode is released. As I said, there's no one else in my office at the time, but that doesn't stop me from doing this. When summoned, they're usually given someone or something to attract. When summoned, they can... Take a breath, Jeremy. Besides multiple... Slow down. Doppelgangers are devious shapeshifters. I used to paint in acrylics, but now I paint in my own. I used to paint in a clear. Slow down. Game mechanics. So make sure. Scrap all that. A few of you did share NPCs, but explicitly said you didn't want to enter the contest to save international shipping costs. A few of you shared slow down, Jeremy. If you like this podcast, please consider helping. Come here. You have migrated away. Come here, you Mike. What are you doing? I don't have the perfect audio set up at my house because, I just can't afford to set up a perfect soundproof area. And sometimes noise from the outside bleeds in a little bit. You're leading by example. Ow. Hags tend to form covens of 3 witches. Sorry. You, plane. No matter what the PCs or the world does to try to bring them back. Airplanes. How to prep an adventure. For my example, we're going to listen to the truck going by outside, because evidently mufflers are a foreign concept. However, my least favorite thing is when my neighbor who doesn't understand what a muffler is drives by when I'm recording. What's funny is that the audio processing I have filters out that truck sound, but when I was recording, it was loud enough to completely distract me from what I was doing. This next section can only be described as weird sounds that I make when I record. In putting together today's episode, I listened to all my mistakes and I discovered I have this weird habit when I mess up while recording. This is easily the longest section of the episode, and it's not even 1/5 of the times that I did this. I just trimmed it all down to a reasonable length of wordless, moronic outbursts. Without further ado, here is your professional podcast host, hard at work. If you want your players to role play more, if you want your character... I would encourage you to focus on the districts the PCs will spend the most time on. I would encourage you to spend the 1.0 they will not be rescinding they will not be rescinding the license in favor of their original campaign cartography. Do you have an idea for an episode? Do you have an I am hideous. I heard my mom still puts a picture of me down in the crawl space. I heard some indecision arises out Pinkerton and other groups and individuals, including private investigators who specify drink quality and the quality of the establishment, and if you need inspiration, look to real world Hey, thank you for listening to episode 2. He used his considerably growing power to protect his adopted civilization, even questing into the abyss at one point to kill the demon lord Tune in next week when we'll talk about getting your... Support everyone role-playing by giving them a safe in a frontier town that serves as a jumping-off point for adventuring in a wild... That serves as a jumping-off point for adventuring in a wild wilderness... That serves as a jumping... However, if you want the bargain between the mortal and the immortal to... If you want the bargain between the immortal... Tune in next week when I'm going to talk about how to do the 5e mem... 5e mem... Those actions don't take a long time. But I'm not the home... Continuing the Back to Basics series, just... If you do intend to... If they chose to do so, then they would reach this political... If they chose to do so, then they would reach this If they chose to do so, then they would reach this particular... I've mentioned I'm running a pirate campaign because my players said they wanted to be buccaneers on the high... Consumables like healing potions that aren't part of the monster... When they grapple a PC that's restrained, blinded, can't... When they grapple a PC, that PC is restrained, blinded. Dang it. In Pathfinder 2e, for example, Shaylin is the I mentioned at the start of this episode that you can give monsters better equipment. For particular tough... But what if you said something like this? The T-Rex and... For my example, I'm going to prep the free adventure Paizo gave away on their free RPG game. If you want to support this podcast, head over to... If you want to support this Okay, I saved this section for the very end. As I was putting together this list, there were quite a few times when I dropped some words I probably shouldn't have. I put them all in this one handy little section. As I mentioned previously, I did edit out the curse words with funny horn sounds, but if you're offended by potential hints at strong language, you may want to stop the episode here. But for the rest of you, I am terribly sorry for what you're about to hear. With a little mutual respect, First of all prophecy ceased function. So besides being the god of humanity, God was also the god of... Besides being the god of humanity... Now you may be thinking, that's neat, Jeremy, but I don't play Pathfinder. I run games in Dungeons & Dragons, or Blades in the Dark, or Mork Borg, or Siger... I run games in Dungeons & Dragons, or Blades in the Dark, or Mork Borg, or Siger... Conrad! Yeah, that's right, he asked me to help... That's right, he helped us... Quest givers, whether they are job boards, overheard conversations, or critical NPCs, are more likely to become a... At the appointed hour of Aroden's return, the planet was racked with 3 weeks of storms and earthquakes felt all over the At the appointed hour of Aroden... Give them realistic actions and character progression, and I'd bet you and your characters... Robert Norris generally... Tune in next week when we'll hit the back to the basics. That's it. That's a collection of goof ups, errors, bloopers, and just F ups from the last 52 episodes. I hope you enjoyed it because I loved the out of making it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback at taking20podcast.com, or direct message me on Facebook or Instagram. Happy New Year, my friends. I'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Until then, be kind and accepting of each other, and I hope that your next game is your best game.
The Taking 20 podcast is a Publishing Cube media production. Copyright 2023. References to game system content are copyright their respective publishers.